Hello, I'm Rachel Weiss, a counsellor from Rowan Consultancy in Scotland. I'd like to share some of my thoughts about kindness with you, since this is Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme this year is kindness. So, here we go. I'll look at some of the common feelings we have, and how you can be kind to other people, and how you can be kind to yourself. So those are the 3 points in 10 minutes. Here we go. Here are the common feelings that people experience often, and particularly when a sudden change happens, like we're experiencing at the moment. It's COVID-19 time. But any change that happens in your life, usually our initial reaction is one of shock and denial. This can't be happening. Some of us just go into overdrive and coping, and we do and cope with the crisis and don't feel. Other people feel first and get a bit paralyzed and are unable to act. Or you're somewhere in between. Here are the variety of feelings you may dip into, either initially or later after you've finished doing the coping bit. Often people feel sad for the loss, whatever they've lost in the change. Every change brings gain and loss. So we can feel sadness, sometimes despair and hopelessness. So just note down which feelings you're aware that you're perhaps experiencing at the moment. We can feel fear. We often do. We're scared, generally, of the future. How will I cope? What will happen? And when we experience fear, we often go into freeze, flight, or fight mode. Some of us just get paralyzed, others become aggressive, bringing us neatly to anger. That's another common response to an unwelcome change, is we get angry. We need to blame somebody, the universe, our boss, our partner, whoever is available. And the other emotion that we sometimes experience in change is actually some joy, some pleasure, usually mixed in amongst all of these things. You don't just have one at a time, often you're dotting around between them. And as time passes, you may notice that you occasionally dip into the next stage, which is acceptance of the change, welcome or unwelcome. And treasure those moments when you realize you've dipped into accepting the change and realizing this is how it's going to be and making the most of it. But that takes a while. We often need to express these other feelings first, and some of us may get stuck in one or other of these and find it harder to move on. So my top tip on feelings is acknowledge the feeling you've got. See if you can identify your main feeling. Whenever you might notice it in your body first, that you're out of sorts. Okay, I'm out of sorts. Which of those feelings? Anger, fear, sadness, happiness. Which one is it? Try not to judge it, just acknowledge it and then accept it. I am feeling angry, I am feeling scared, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling happy. It's the first step. Okay, so now let's move on to being kind to other people. Sometimes tough, comes easier to others. So if someone you know is acting like any of these types here, they're probably having a bad day. Probably not doing it deliberately to get at you. But some of us just take things personally when we see these behaviors. Try and think a bit bigger. So these 4 colors, they come from insights.com. They identify different energies we have. So fiery red, I'm often fiery red. If I'm having a bad day, I may turn into a micromanager or be overbearing. When you encounter somebody who's being like that, maybe you find them bullying or intimidating, they might just be having a bad day. You can still call out bad behavior and let them know the impact on you. That's actually kind, because it may help them improve and not get into trouble with other people. But if you can do it in a kind way, I'd like to give you this feedback, because people who've got more of that earth green caring energy may come across, you may get infuriated with them because they're closed-minded, they don't want to hear anything new, they won't take the initiative. On good days, these people are the kindest people on earth. But when they're struggling, they may almost disappear and you feel you're not getting anything back from them. Cool blue people might find it hard to decide. Usually they're ace at researching things, gathering data, being logical. So if you find someone a bit cold one day, maybe it's not personal. Maybe they're having a bad day. And our sunshine yellow people, that's the playful, delightful, spontaneous, childlike people. When they're having a bad day, they just let us down. They say, oh, sorry, I can't make it, or they just don't turn up. This could be friends or work colleagues. So just a thought, maybe somebody's having a bad day. I don't want that to be a get out clause for bad behavior, but to enable you to approach them in a kind way. Here's a useful mantra. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. Just imagine living your life believing that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have, with the knowledge they have, the childhood they have, with the resources they have. Next time someone drives you up the wall, I invite you just to consider maybe they're doing the best they can with what they have. It doesn't mean you have to put up with what they're doing, but it means you can be kind in your response to them. Kind in how you give them feedback. Kind in how you maybe turn a blind eye or not. So I offer that to you. Maybe try that for 24 hours. Live 24 hours as if you believed that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have. So that means we might offer help or support. Final point on being kind to others, it's contagious. Kindness is often contagious. Don't wait to catch it from others, be the carrier. Okay, let's have a look at how you can be kind to yourself. First off, some of us have been brought up to think that self-care is selfish. It's not, okay? So just notice if you've been programmed that way to think that looking after yourself is selfish. It's not. It's absolutely essential. You can't serve from an empty vessel. Personally, I think we can't rely on other people being kind to us. That would be lovely. But, you know, that's our responsibility to look after ourselves. We don't need to put it on other people and think they should be nice to me. They should be kind to me. Let's take some control of our lives and find out how to be kind to ourselves. You probably know already, so start thinking already, how are you kind to yourself? This is how I used to think. I used to think that hard work could make me productive. And as you probably all know, but it's not. You need to combine hard work with time off and sleep and healthy eating and exercise. Research shows that if we rest, if I'm working on a problem, it's actually better to take a rest if I can, go and do something else for a bit and come back. And in that time, my mind is turning over and I'll be more creative and have better ideas. Of course, this relies on your line manager also knowing this slide. You may want to share it with them. This is one for the workaholics, or the people who always put others first. She believed she could, but she was tired, so she rested. And it was okay. You are an amazing person. You can do 101 things, but it's okay not to sometimes. As I say, this is really for those of us who push ourselves and put others first. You may have the opposite problem. Maybe you find it hard to get motivated and do something. But I found that helpful. 2 more thoughts on being kind to yourself. I really recommend you limit how much you see the news or hear the news or check it on your phone. The news is almost by definition bad news. That's what makes the news, unless you subscribe to positive news. So it's kind of poisoning your mind and feeding the fear and the anger and the despair, those emotions we spoke to earlier. So by all means be well informed, but if you want to be kind to yourself, limit maybe 5 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, whatever works for you to take in the news and perhaps feed your brain with more positive stuff the rest of the time, if you can. Talk to yourself like you would to someone you love. So just notice if you're feeling guilty listening to me or annoyed, and thinking, oh, why don't I do all that stuff? I should eat healthily. I should limit the news intake. What would you say if someone you loved said that to you? You'd probably say, be easy on yourself. Why don't you start with baby steps? It's okay to slip up occasionally. Try again. You know, whatever kind thing you'd say to them, or give them a hug or stroke them. Talk to yourself like you would to someone you love. Most of us talk to ourselves in quite a kind of scoldy, telling off way, quite an unkind way, to be honest. Listen to how you talk to yourself. Now let's wrap up by thinking about how are you kind to yourself? It's different for each of us. What works for me won't necessarily work for you. Here's what works for me, just in case it gives you ideas. I love watching box sets. Currently working my way through Killing Eve. Here's Sandra Oh, who's fabulous in it. Being outside really works for me. This is where I'd like to be. Currently, I can just walk the pavements, but there's a lovely lilac bush that I can smell. So being outdoors, moving outdoors, being active outdoors works for me. And having a Sabbath, that's 24 hours off, where I just do not work and try and avoid as many chores as possible. Think about what works for you. How do you look after yourself? They get taught this at school now, but hundreds of years ago when I was at school, we were never taught how to look after ourselves. We were never encouraged to think what is good for you. Is being alone good for you, or is phoning a friend good for you? And the answer may change from day to day, hour to hour. So I really encourage you to think, what is good for me? How can I look after myself? What can I control myself in my life? What choices can I make? Here are a shed load of ideas. Do press pause and read them. Loads of ways to look after yourself. We're getting better, I think, at knowing how to look after ourselves physically, but we're still a bit behind the curve on knowing how to look after ourselves emotionally, spiritually, personally, financially, even. We just don't talk about these things. So thank goodness for Mental Health Awareness Week, day, month, year. If you can tell someone these things, that would be great. Not in a preachy way, but just tell them you watched this and had some ideas. So I really hope that you will go away and think how to be kind to yourself and kind to others. There's more tips on our website, rowan-consultancy.co.uk. There are links to web chats, email forums, telephone helplines, advice sheets. These are the other things that we do at Rowan, counselling, coaching, and so on. And do follow us on social media. We'd love to hear from you if you found any of these tips helpful, or just follow us. We tend to post a whole photos, memes, tips, things like that to do with well-being. So thank you for listening, and please be kind. Maybe just stop for 5 minutes now and rest.